So, Tears of the Kingdom just released about a week ago, and it takes what was so great in Breath of the Wild and makes nearly everything better in many ways. So, I'm sure many people already agree that Tears of the Kingdom is a better game, but I wanted to make this video anyways. I just want to talk about the things that did better in this game, and why it's just such a good game, and why I love it so much. This game is just amazing. Alright, so first of all, there's much more areas to explore. So like, for example, Sky Islands, Underground, and Caves. So, Nintendo absolutely proved wrong to all the people who called Tears of the Kingdom just $70 DLC. Yes, so this does use the Breath of the Wild map as a base, but it adds on and changes it in so many ways. It also adds a lot of new areas to explore, such as the Sky Islands, where you start the game on, caves you can find at the bottom of mountains, and finally, an entire underground called the Depths, which goes under nearly the entirety of Hyrule. So the Depths, they weren't even promoted or talked about by Nintendo, and it's not really a spoiler since you can go down there really early on in the game. You can jump down the chasms, which are new in the game, and these are big holes. They open up filled with gloom. It's like a more dangerous and evil version of Malice in Breath of the Wild, so that's cool. So yeah, you can dive down the chasms, or you can go down a well, or whatever other method to get down there. And this is a very strong contrast to the overworld, so it's pitch black, there's creepy vibes, and there's a lot to explore. So down there you can find Zonai, which is used to expand your Zonai energy for vehicles, and in the depths there's also many enemies who are more powerful than on the surface, and getting damaged by them or by the gloom makes it where it takes away your hearts and you can't get those back. So it's much more dangerous and serious, and you can't just use food to recover your health until you leave the depths, so it's very high stakes and very dangerous down there. So, I'm still sort of early on in this game, and I'm not super well equipped to go down in the depths, but I have explored a bit, and there's enemy camps, and there's rewards, and there's some other things you can explore and find. So, you want to have bright bloom seeds to be able to see down there. You can fuse these to an arrow and then shoot it in order to light up so you can see. Otherwise, everything down there is just pretty much pitch black. There's also these really creepy gloom hands. They have big eyes on the palms of like their hands. It's made out of gloom. They come after you and they can easily kill you quickly if you're not careful. So yeah, the stakes much higher. You can't regenerate health with food, so you need to be equipped pretty good with many hearts if you go down there. And then also the caves. In a way, they're similar to depths, but they're more like areas like in Minecraft, where you can mine underground. There's various caves around Hyrule, and these have enemies and like ore and water and some other things. And these can also be helpful for getting to the top of tall places like mountains. You can use Ascend to quickly go through the ceiling and up to the top. And then finally, the new and heavily promoted by Nintendo Sky Islands. So these are what they imply. They're islands floating in the skies, and there's a lot of them. So, first of all, you start the game on a very large set of Sky Islands, and this acts like a tutorial area, very similar to the Great Plateau in Breath of the Wild, and there's several shrines here which introduce the new abilities, and these help the player get used to the game mechanics. There's just so much content in this area alone. You could spend several hours just exploring here, playing around with the new abilities before you even go down to the surface and start in the main game. Which is crazy. You could spend like 5 hours in the tutorial area before even starting, and there's so much content just here. And there's also many different ways to get up to the Sky Islands as well. You can use Recall on the rocks that fall from the sky, or you can use Zonai to fly up, or use Ascend, or any other creative ways that you can figure out in this game. And then lastly for this, there's also new towns. There's different things to explore and find on the map, such as a new town near Hyrule Castle, which is Lookout Landing, and I'll get more into the changes in this game compared to Breath of the Wild later on in this video. So next up, another big reason why Tears of the Kingdom is better than Breath of the Wild. There's a lot of new quality of life mechanics and features. So let's get into this. So first of all, there's cooking recipes. So now when you're cooking, you can make anything. The recipe, it'll be logged, and you can easily select an item or a meal, and you can view the available recipes, and then just with the press of a button, you can instantly grab all the materials for that recipe, and you can throw it in a pot to make food quickly, so you don't have to remember every food combination. You can just select a thing, and then boom. And also the menu is changed and a bit better in this game, so it now scrolls up and down in any section, and then you use left and right shoulder buttons, which makes it easier to navigate going back and forth in your inventory. There's also the new log feature, so when you're talking to anyone in the conversation, so you can press Y and you can see all the dialogue in the conversation so far. So this is very helpful. If you press A too fast, you skip past some dialogue you wanted to read, you can go and see it all in one place. Also, the new abilities are now selected using a scroll wheel, so since materials they are now mapped to the D-pad to use with Fuse, you can press and hold L to select them, which can take a little bit to get used to, but it becomes pretty easy, and you don't have to swipe left or right through all your abilities to select one, and you can just easily tilt the stick in one direction to select it using the circle wheel. Next up, better inventory management. So, in Breath of the Wild, when you opened a chest and your inventory was full, it was so annoying. You had to close the chest, go open up your inventory, drop the weapon, and then open it back up. Such a pain. So now, if your inventory is full, you open a chest, it pops up, and then you can see your inventory. You can easily select a weapon to drop, and then boom, pick up the item. Don't have to go in and out, and it's way shorter. So you instantly receive the item in the chest, and you don't have to exit the screen. Very helpful. And then last thing for quality of life, so you can dive while falling. Pretty sure this wasn't in Breath of the Wild, and it makes sense because of the Sky Island. So when you're falling down from the sky or anywhere else, you can press R to dive, get down to the ground much faster. But of course, make sure to pull out your paraglider before you slam into the ground. And this also helps since you could jump from very, very high up on the Sky Islands. Number 3's next reason, so the story is much stronger. So I will just say, Tears of the Kingdom has a much more involved and prevalent story. Unlike where in Breath of the Wild, you mostly had to seek out the story, and most of it was told in reference to the past with the memories, which just does have memories too, but it has a lot more cutscenes and interesting interactions that all add to the story. There's a lot of voice acting and full cutscenes. It seems to be more than Breath of the Wild, which is nice. And there's still a lot of text to read, but it does make sense to not have everything be a full cutscene because that could be annoying. As the less important scenes or conversations, you can just read and move past quicker, and the more important things are still voice acted. So, yeah, I'm still somewhat early on in the game, but the story's been very interesting. I won't spoil anything, but I'm excited to see where the story goes and the new characters I'll meet along the way. Number 4. So, more interesting abilities with much more creative options in Breath of the Wild. So, let's get into the abilities. So, first of all, Ultra Hand. Basically, Ultra Hand is just a way better version of Magnesis from Breath of the Wild. So this time you can pick up nearly any object and you can make nearly endless amounts of vehicles and other things. So this is a lot of uses in puzzles. It allows you to use various materials around the world along with Zonai devices, and you can make useful vehicles to solve puzzles and traverse around the world much easier. And then next up, Fuse. So this also gives nearly endless things you can make by fusing weapons and materials together. There's so many options for stuff to make. Though, this also helps with the weapon durability issue a bit in Breath of the Wild. This annoyed some people, but in my opinion, it was necessary to make the player use more resources and not just use one super powerful sword and nothing else. So now, you can always make a good weapon. Grab a sword or a stick or something else, fuse it to a material, and boom, you have a good weapon. It's just a lot of fun seeing what combination of the things you can make, and it allows you to be very creative and play around with different things. And this makes collecting materials much more useful than Breath of the Wild. Nearly everything can be fused, so all those random monster parts and other stuff you gathered in Breath of the Wild and you sold later and like, oh, what's the point of this? Well, you can make them into powerful weapons now, or you can attach it to arrows and make them travel further, or make them more powerful, or apply different elemental effects to arrows and weapons like fire, electric, ice, water, bomb, and more. So many options for that. Just crazy. And then the next ability, so Ascend. It might not seem super useful at first, but it can make for some really interesting puzzles, and it has quite a bit of uses in this game as well. And it's especially helpful for getting to high places, and when you're exploring caves in the underground, it's a lot easier to just ascend upwards to the surface than having to backtrack and find your way out, which is literally what the developers did as a cheat code, and they're like, hey, this is much better. Let's add it into the game because you don't have to go all the way out of the cave. You can just go straight up. Boom. Finally, last major ability in the game, at least from what I've unlocked so far, so Recall. Recall is basically like a different, more advanced version of Stasis from Breath of the Wild. And this has a lot of great uses, like with puzzles, you can reverse the movements of objects, and you can also use it to defeat enemies, like by moving objects around with Ultra Hand, then recalling it. And you can make things like homemade elevators or flying machines, because you can just lift an item up with Ultra Hand, and then recall it, and get on it to use it for many different uses. You can also use this to get back at enemies, like if an enemy throws a rock at you, boom, before it hits you, recall it, boom, it slams right into them. Very useful. Number 5, so Zonai devices. So there's many different types of Zonai devices in this game you can get, so there's fans, there's wheels, you can make cars with, there's like the bird-like flying things, I honestly don't know what they're called. There's a flamethrower, dragon heads, and there's more. And you can just use these to like any weapons, you can make vehicles with them, and this just adds a lot more creative options. Also very useful, you can get portable Zonai devices, and you can take these out from your inventory easily and use them anywhere, so if you need them, you have them. And Zonai devices, they do have limits to how long they can turn on, but you can expand it quite a bit by getting Zonai and making energy wells to expand the total power you can use. And you can use Zonai charges. You get to refill the charge of Zonai devices quickly when you need to. Obviously, they can't have unlimited power because, come on, that would be way too overpowered, as cool as it would be. Okay, number 6. So, it's the same world, it's the same map, but it's much bigger and has changed quite a lot. So now there are multiple layers to the map. So of course there's the Sky Islands in the mainland, and there's the one that Nintendo didn't talk about much, but again, it's early on, not really a spoiler, but the underground, the depths. So, Nintendo did show some caves in the trailers, but there's way more than what they showed. There's a whole massive underground system underneath like the whole map, tougher enemies, new things to explore, you can jump down chasms or wells, and boom, so many new things to explore and things to find down there. So yeah, the game, it uses the same map, but there's a lot of changes. Like, there's things being moved around, towns have changed quite a bit, there's a new chasm, there's gloom spreading around the world, there's sky islands, caves, and more. So, the towns, they're the same in some ways, but they've also changed quite a bit. Slight spoiler warning for some of the changes in the towns, but nothing too big. So, Hateno Village, it's become a hub for fashion. It's very mushroom themed now, which is cool. Rito Village, overtaken in a massive blizzard, there's snow everywhere. And Lurelin Village just has been totally taken over and basically destroyed by pirates, with all the inhabitants being driven out to find refuge elsewhere. And Hyrule Castle is literally partially floating because all the new powerful gloom and all the guardians are gone. So if you go to Hyrule Castle, it's a lot more peaceful, which is kind of weird, considering you walked into there and you'd be instantly targeted by like 5 guardians, but it's also kind of nice, so that's interesting. And finally, another thing, so towers, they are in this game, but they're in a different form, the Skyview Towers. It makes more logical sense in this game than in Breath of the Wild. So they're these big lookout towers, and they're used to map the areas and add it to your map, of course. So it's pretty fun, it launches you up in the air, Link pulls out his paraglider and scans the surrounding area, the sky and the surface at the same time. It just makes finding and activating the towers, it makes it feel much more rewarding, because you actually scan it and it makes logical sense with the map, instead of having to climb very far up a tower, and then you never use that tower again. Plus you can just go in the tower and just like go really high up, and then see all around you, pin stuff with your map you can see in the background, very useful. Alright. Number 7. So, Tears of the Kingdom has a much more full and alive world. So, there seems to be a lot more NPCs to talk to in this game. There's a lot more towns, and it's less desolate and like less open wastelands like in Breath of the Wild. After all, people are starting to rebuild. They're trying to fix up Hyrule, so it's quite nice to see people all around. And the towns, they have new characters, and there's characters who are back who have grown up or changed from the last game too, which is very cool. And also, it's interesting how the characters, they react to the environment more, so, like, of course, enemies, they interact with the world more, like, constructs cutting wood, or, like, constructs using weapons and stuff like that. And also, NPCs, again, they're much more involved, and they're, like, more aware of the world. Like, I went to a stable once, and it was pouring rain. All the NPCs were talking about it, how miserable the weather was, and having, like, different conversations about it. It just makes it feel more alive, like, everyone's connected, everyone's experiencing the same things. They talk about all the things, like the crazy things in Hyrule. They talk about like other villages and other people, and it's just very interesting and very cool. Okay, so number 8, better graphics and performance. So, okay, it's not perfect. After all, the Switch is nearly 7 years old, but this game, it still looks and runs incredible for the Switch. Like, it's impressive. I've heard it targets around like 900p or so it's not exactly full 1080p, but honestly, I don't really notice it, and the frame rate is mostly consistent around 30 FPS. There are some slight dips, like the Sky Islands or Korok Forest, or just using your abilities like Ultra Hand can make it dip a bit, and like it is a little noticeable sometimes, but honestly, I just have never really noticed. I don't typically notice these things. It's not a big deal to me. It still seems to run really smoothly, and the graphics, they look really good. The art style is great. It's like Breath of the Wild, but a bit better and a little bit different. And the draw distance also quite a bit better now. Very impressive. You can dive from the Sky Islands and see nearly the entire map of Hyrule at the same time. It's pretty amazing. It's a lot less foggy and a lot less blurry when you look at far off things in the landscape, and it's quite impressive. I think overall, it just helps that this game was actually built for the Switch and not for the Wii U, plus they've had so much time to work on it. And then finally, there's just so much content and stuff you can do in this game. this just seems like a game you could play for like 500 hours or more and never get bored, honestly. So there's a lot of engaging side quests in this game. Of course, Breath of the Wild had those too, but this game has side quests and side adventures, like a lot of them which connect and all like go together and are just much deep and not just like fetch quests. So I like them quite a bit better in Tears of the Kingdom. Like one I've experienced so far, slight spoiler warning for Hateno Village, but not much. In Hateno Village, so there's a bunch of interconnected side quests. These combine together for an interesting mini whole side story. There's like the CC versus Reed mayoral election, and there's a whole bunch of things you can do and people to talk to. You get rewards and you explore the town and you get to know all the NPCs, and it's all connected and it's all like a whole side story instead of just random one-off quests. And I'm like 35 to 40 hours in right now, somewhere in there. And honestly, I still feel like I'm very early in the main story. Because like, I'll tell myself, oh, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to do this main quest. Then I get distracted by some cool things I found. Oh, there's a shrine. Oh, there's a sky island I want to go to. Oh, there's a cave. Oh, I want to go to the depths. Like, and that's awesome. Like, I love just getting distracted. It's like Breath of the Wild, but times 10. Breath of the Wild, you could kind of walk in any direction. You find something cool. This one, there's awesome stuff everywhere. Like, I'm still doing the regional phenomena main quest. I've only completed one of the main villages of the 4 you're supposed to go to. Like, because I'm just going around. There's shrines, I'm finding towers, and I'm just going everywhere. And it's so fun. And then last, number 10, just some very small but cool things I wanted to mention. So, your paraglider can be customized with all sorts of various cool cloths with different designs. And this does also add more use to Zelda amiibos, because when you scan them, they give sometimes different like cool glider cloths, and there's a bunch of cool designs you can get. Stables, they now have a membership system where you can get points and earn prizes, and you can also get sleepover tickets to stay at inns or stables for free for a night, and these give some different rewards for staying at stables for a while. Like, this was absolutely not needed, but like, it's a small thing that's just awesome, you know? And then another thing, the shrines. A lot more varied and a lot more interesting than the ones in Breath of the Wild. The new abilities, they allow much more unique puzzles with many different ways to solve them. And dungeons also return in the form of temples, which I'm not going to spoil here. But, in my opinion, they are much better than the Divine Beasts in Breath of the Wild. They're so much fun and like take a while to explore. You can use the different abilities, like there's different layers. Like you can use Ascend, like, ooh, there's this area I need to go to, but it's locked. And how do I get in here? So you need to find a way to get underneath, and boom, you can ascend to it. And there was this one, again, I'm not going to spoil it. There's like 5 different keys you need to find, like the spots in Breath of the Wild, where you need to go and find all the spots. And there's a bunch of different areas, and you need to use a power, like, these are all themed with like an elemental power, something like that. And then you need to use like all these powers and stuff in different ways to activate these keys to basically finish this dungeon. And it's very cool, much more involved, much more interesting than the Divine Beasts. Because the Divine Beasts, they were kind of cool. Technically they were dungeons, but they all kind of looked the same. They had a similar design. The boss fights, they were similar. They were different. They were like forms of Ganon, and like these were cool. They were interesting fights, but again, they just seemed too similar. But this one, it just changes up quite a bit. And just like the different quests you have to do to get to these is very cool. And the bosses also, again, I've only fought one of them after the dungeon, after I completed it. And it was very cool. It was kind of tough, but it was this really big, crazy boss I was not expecting, although it wasn't one of the trailers. But it was just really awesome, honestly, and I find this so much more interesting, and it's also a lot less frustrating than in Divine Beasts in Breath of the Wild, because I'm trying to go through Tears of the Kingdom without using any guides, because I just feel like it's more fun, right? But in Breath of the Wild, there were some of the Divine Beasts I just kept trying and trying. I could not figure out what to do, because the things you have to rotate, like that could be kind of frustrating, and where do I rotate this, and I go to here and here and here, and like I just had to use guides sometimes, and it was fine, like, but this one, I did spend quite a while on this temple, this dungeon, but I never felt like, oh, I absolutely can't do this. I kept looking around, I tried different angles, I tried my abilities, and finally it clicked. I'm like, oh, this is how you do it, of course. And it's just like, it's awesome. Anyways, last thing, so the music in this game, surprise, surprise, it's amazing, of course, just like Breath of the Wild. So a lot of songs from Breath of the Wild return, which I'm fine with since I love Breath of the Wild soundtrack. And I like these songs a lot, but there's also a lot of new great songs. There's some returning songs that are remixed with different versions, like some of the villages. Like, there's just interesting remix music and just, like, a ton of new music. Like, if you look up the soundtrack on YouTube, there's so much. Like, I haven't even heard it all, but overall it's just really good. Of course, atmospheric music too. And the sound also is very immersive. Just like the sound effects when you play, especially I've played with headphones like a few times. And all like the footsteps in the water, in the rain. It's just like so much better than Breath of the Wild somehow. It just makes you feel immersed in this world. Just the atmospheric music and it's just like the sounds when you splash in the water goes everywhere, and then the water is like dripping off Link, and it's just the world's all connected. I could go on and on. This game, it's just, it's impressive. It's insane. I absolutely love this game. I could talk about this game for a long time, so I'm gonna finish this video up. Anyways, yeah. This game is really amazing. I already love Breath of the Wild so much, but this improved on that game in many different ways. It's just so impressive, really. Yeah, there's a lot more stuff I could talk about, but I'll keep it at this for now. Yeah, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, like and subscribe to see the videos I post in the future. I have several other interesting Tears of the Kingdom videos planned, along with some other game videos in the future. And I'm also currently working on a first impressions video for Tears of the Kingdom. I know a lot of people have done that already, but I wanted to make my own since there's so many things I just want to talk about because this game is amazing. And yeah, I'll just go on and on talking so much stuff. But yeah, make sure to like and subscribe, and thank you for watching, and bye.